If you're a woman living in 2018, you'll be very familiar with this advice.
Take responsibility for your safety. Make sure that you have situational awareness. Make sure that people know where you are and that, if you've got a mobile phone, carry it.
People need to be aware of their own personal security.
That's some good advice, actually. Everyone should be aware of their security and take responsibility for their own safety. I mean, we all want to be safe, don't we? Being aware of your surroundings is important, especially given the diversity we've had forced on us in recent times. What do you reckon, Lisa?
But it's a sentiment we've heard before.
I suggest to people, particularly females, they shouldn't be alone in parks. We just need to be a little bit more careful, a little bit more security conscious.
Okay, so police have advised people to be careful before. What's your point?
That advice came after the 2015 murder of 17-year-old Melbourne schoolgirl Marsha Vukotic.
Okay, and that was a tragedy, but it's still good advice. I don't get your point.
The thing is, both these women most likely took that all too familiar advice. We know Eurydice had her mobile phone with her and let people know where she was because the last thing she did was message her partner. I'm almost home safe. How about you?
Wait a minute. How is that proof she took police advice? It's just a text. That doesn't seem like a very good argument to me.
And while Marsha was alone and wearing headphones, chances are she was being both careful and vigilant.
Chances are? Really? By wearing headphones, she takes away a big part of her own situational awareness. Chances are she didn't actually think it was possible to get attacked in the way she did. And that's not an unreasonable assumption. I mean, nobody expects or deserves to be raped and killed walking home. It's a horrible crime. The point is to be aware of your surroundings, and wearing headphones means you just aren't. How do you know she was being vigilant, Lisa?
Because she's a woman, and that's what we all have to do.
Wait, what? That's not an argument.
There's so much advice, so many rules around what we should do and what we shouldn't. It's hard to keep track of just how we're supposed to keep ourselves safe. Don't go out at night, don't walk alone, don't wear short skirts, don't draw attention to yourself, don't find yourself near strange men.
It's just advice, you don't have to take it if you don't want to. It's called being a responsible grown-up. What's your point, Lisa?
And the best way to prevent this crime and keep all women safe isn't by changing the behaviour of women, but by changing the behaviour of men.
What the f***? This is Lisa Wilkinson, presenter of one of Australia's most far-left TV programs, The Project. She recently made an emotional plea to men in the wake of the rape and murder of Eurydice Dixon in a Melbourne park when she was walking home. According to Wilkinson, it is men who need to change because apparently men are just all violent pigs and potential rapists.
Already this year, 31 women in Australia have been murdered. All but 3 of those were allegedly killed by male perpetrators.
Yeah, but how many men were killed, you muppet? In 2017, there were 245 murders. It's exactly halfway through 2018, so assuming the rates are the same as last year, there has been roughly 120 murders in Australia so far this year. Giving 2018 the benefit of the doubt,
because it's 2015.
Let's say there has been 100 murders in Australia so far this year. Assuming 31 of those were women, that means 69 men were murdered. That's more than twice as many. What about no genders, Maddie? Ugh, come on, I'm trying to work here. Just trolling. Yes, males are more likely to commit violence, but males are also far more likely to be the victims of violence. Making this a gendered issue is dumb. Demonising all men for the crime of one individual is deplorable.
Women killed at the hands of violent men, yet it's women who are being asked to change their behaviour?
Ironic, given this entire rant is about demanding men change their behaviour due to a tiny minority of psychopaths acting without instruction. In spite of the fact that 99.9% of men know rape is evil. It's like she thinks men go to how to rape classes or something. Okay class, settle down. Welcome to Patriarchy School. Lesson 1, why rape is okay. But rape's not okay. Aha! Just wait for the lesson on Sweden.
The problem is when they say this.
Take responsibility for your safety. Make sure that people know where you are and that, if you've got a mobile phone, carry it.
Did you hear that? We're the ones who have to take responsibility.
Did you hear that? I doubt it, because most strawmen don't say much when you knock them down. No voice box and all. He's not saying it's women's fault they get raped. He's saying you should do everything you can to ensure your own personal safety. Exactly like any good parent would tell their child. How is it bad advice?
Because she's pushing a narrative and needs to attack people who might threaten it.
Short boss, yes, but don't spoil it.
They're focused on how to prevent this crime at the individual or micro level. If one woman doesn't walk at night, that one woman won't be attacked.
Individuals commit crimes and individuals are the victims of crimes. Solving the issue on the individual level is the way to solve it.
But the problem with giving this advice is that it keeps that one woman safe at the expense of all women's right to move freely.
Actually, staying vigilant and aware is good advice for everyone, and no reasonable person wants to take away anyone's right to move freely. There is one right that our government has actually taken away. It's a right and would most certainly have prevented this tragedy, but we'll get to that later. Now, we get to the real point of Wilkinson's little rant.
We need our leaders to think and speak at the macro level.
We already have a macro strategy. It's called putting rapists and murderers in prison for a long time.
And the best way to prevent this crime and keep all women safe isn't by changing the behaviour of women, but by changing the behaviour of men.
That's right. It's all our fault, lads. Our evil testosterone means we just can't help ourselves. It's not like rape is against the law and already gets hefty prison sentences or anything. Males need to change because kill all men or something like that.
This might upset some people, but honestly, parents, instead of telling our girls not to walk through parks, maybe we should be telling our boys not to rape them.
What the
Calm down, short bus. Don't forget what you learned in patriarchy school. Hello, and welcome to lesson 2. Tell everyone it's okay to rape.
Margaret Atwood, the author who wrote the dystopian feminist novel The Handmaid's Tale more than 30 years ago, captured the imbalance we're talking about here when she remarked, "Men are afraid that women will laugh at them. Women are afraid that men will kill them."
There's nothing like an anti-male quote from a radical feminist to really set that agenda. Again, she ignores the fact that men are far more likely to be the victims of violence. Yes, men are more likely to commit violence, but that's not the point. It doesn't matter what gender the perpetrator is. All that matters is the crime, its effects, and locking up offenders. A man murdered by a woman is just as dead as a woman murdered by a man, or a man murdered by a man, or a woman murdered by a woman. Violence against anyone is bad. Duh. After attacking all men as rape and murder apologists, Lisa and her fellow panelists do all they can to confirm those warped views she's presented. Nobody challenges her, nobody calls her out on what was nothing short of an appalling attack on men and boys, nobody points out the facts. Fancy saying to boys, "Oh, by the way, you're nothing but a potential rapist and murderer and it's because of the way you were born." What a horrible thing to say. What a horrible message to send anyone, let alone young boys. To add to the joke, one of Wilkinson's soyboy followers signals his virtue as hard as he can.
And you're absolutely right there, Lisa. As you say in the piece, it's a macro problem and it needs to be solved. But unfortunately, it's an enormous problem with a hugely long-term solution. And until we get to that point, I understand those fears you talk about there, George.
Well, aren't we all just blessed to have bearded hipster in suit to remind us murder and rape are bad, and we always want less of it. Thank you for your wonderful insight. Now go get yourself a soy latte. Here's the thing. The murder rate in Australia is tiny compared to the rest of the world. You can watch Bearing's video on this topic for a rundown, but here is a simple graph from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. It ends in 2006, but as mentioned, the number of murders in 2017 was 245. Given we'd had a huge surge in population, that tells the story. It's extremely unlikely to be murdered in Australia. Not only is Wilkinson wrong about who needs to change, not only is she sending a horrible message, but she's also using this tragedy to push radical feminist gender politics. She's using a tragedy to divide men against women. So now I'm going to use this opportunity to point something out that this fool will never admit. Remember how I mentioned a certain right we lost? Well, let's have a look at that graph, shall we? Notice the trend. Notice how it's relatively steady downwards trend from the late 80s to 2006 and actually continues beyond it. Notice also how there were more murders in 2001 than in 1996. Who knows what happened in 1996?
I know. North Melbourne beat Sydney in the grand final a week after Tony Lockett kicked a point after the Sirens beat the Bombers and put the Swans in.
Yeah, that happened, but something else also happened. Short bus. The answer is simple. The Port Arthur massacre happened, and John Howard, who was then Prime Minister, used it to take away Australians' right to own firearms in most instances. Exactly right. And as the graph shows, the murder rate was effectively unchanged, so we aren't actually any safer. There is no correlation between gun ownership and murder rate, other than a slightly negative one. You can watch Stefan Molyneux's video, The Truth About Gun Control, for a full rundown of the facts. Why do I bring this up? Simple. If Eurydice Dixon was carrying a firearm, she'd almost certainly be alive today. The government stole our God-given right to self-defense, and we are no safer for it. She'd also be alive if she'd taken an Uber home or walked home with a man she trusted. An actual man, not a soyboy hipster male feminist. They can't defend a thing. But hey, let's all just blame men, because why address real problems or encourage personal responsibility when you've got a far left culture war to run?
I have a question. If all men are responsible for the crimes of one male, does that mean all Muslims...